Well, hello everybody. This is Susan Gillis at the Schmidt Boca Raton History Museum, and welcome to our next segment of Ask the Curator. I am often asked about Camino Real, one of our most important east-west highways, because the legend has it that in Mr. Meisner's era, there was going to be a canal down the center of Camino Real, and you were going to be able to gondola from the Boca Raton, Florida East Coast Railway Station all the way to the hotel right by the Intercoastal, which today is the Boca Raton, formerly the Boca Raton Resort and Club, and as we all know, originally designed by Mr. Meisner and opened in 26. Well, this is not accurate, but I know where the story is coming from. So I wanted to discuss that a little with you in front of this magnificent painting of that very proposed canal. First of all, early in Mr. Meisner's literature, and you've got to remember here, he's around town in 25, 26, and 27, and that's it. The advertisements for the Boca Raton development do say that there is going to be a canal on El Camino Real inspired by Rio de Janeiro's Botafogo, which is a beautiful boulevard. Now, Botafogo is a part of Rio de Janeiro, but in fact, this canal was inspired by yet a different canal that did exist in Rio back in the 20s, known as the Mangue Canal, and it was on the Rua Visconde de Jauna. Okay, forgive my Portuguese. This is a copy of what we call a stereo slide, stereoscopic viewer. It's an old Viewmaster, if you will. And you can see, if you compare the slide to the painting, clearly the painting was inspired by this very picture, which Mr. Meisner would have had a copy of. And in fact, everybody who had the set of Scenes of the World for their stereoscopic viewers would have this beautiful canal. So that clearly was the inspiration for the idea of the canal. According to the early literature, their Camino Real was going to go from the beachfront hotel, which was never built by Meisner, which would have stood about where the beach club is today. There would be a bridge over the inlet, a bridge over the Intercoastal, and it would extend all the way inland to roughly Military Trail. And lying between the roadways at its center, threaded by a silvery canal flowing under culverts at intersections. Okay, well, if there are culverts, it's not navigable. I'd like to point that out. Also, I read this. Palmater Park Road, not Camino Real, will not only have driveways and parkways, but in the center there will be a canal for gondolas and other small watercraft. Okay, so now we're really confused. Well, by 1926, the literature is very clear. Instead of this proposed canal going all the way to the beach, the canal portion of Camino Real was going to be west of the El Rio. And I have a map here of Mr. Meisner's plats. This is once they sort of gotten their plans together, really were organized about what they were doing. In fact, Camino Real east of Dixie Highway was, according to this literature, one of the crowning glories of Boca Raton. It is wide enough east of the Dixie Highway to accommodate 22 lines of moving traffic. And there's actually a picture of the administration building, which today is Addison's, with this wide boulevard where Camino Real and Addison's are today. And if you think about it, take out the medians and the sidewalks and put a bunch of Model Ts in there, you can fit a lot of cars across there. However, shortly to the west, you encounter the El Rio Canal, which already existed, and it was west of there that this canal system was going to flow, and it was for looks only. Again, this map shows culverts periodically, so would not have been navigable. In fact, it was to flow all the way west to what today is, well, almost to Military Trail, but west of the Amtrak tracks, so west of I-95, to what Meisner called the Ritz-Carlton Park development, which was a golf course community. Now let me tell you where that is. The Ritz-Carlton Golf Course Park was actually where Sugar Sand Park is today. And in fact, the golf course was built in 1927 and played upon. And it's hard to imagine, but we have photographs of that. It became Sugar Sand. So the canal was going to flow sort of in the middle of the park and then head north for a little bit, but strictly for beauty's sake. So you could have people that were sort of on the water, if you will, on the canal. Now, the confusion about the story comes from the fact that people don't realize that our beautiful Boca Raton, Florida East Coast Railway Station, which still stands, was not built by Meisner at all. Meisner planned a railway station about where 95 crosses Camino Real. That is where, right by the Amtrak tracks, in those days, the Seaboard Airline, and yes, it was called airline, it was a train, and though that rail line was being built in 26, 27, they knew it was coming, but it had not arrived yet. But the Seaboard was a cross-country train. It wasn't just a Florida train. It would bring tourists and so on from New York all the way to Miami. So that was really important to have a station there. And Meisner did, in fact, design a station called Addison Station. He was always so modest. And that was going to be built right there near Camino Real and 95. That did not happen. So people have confused that station, which didn't happen, with the little station that did happen, that was built several years after Meisner had departed the scene, for really at the behest of Mr. Clarence Geiss, who was the second owner of the hotel, built by the Florida East Coast Railway organization and designed by a man named Chester Henninger. Because Mr. Geiss needed a decent passenger station for people arriving to come to stay at the Boca Raton Club, which is actually the descendant of Mr. Meisner's Cloister Inn. Before that, all we had was an old freight depot, which was located closer to Town Hall at Palmetto and Dixie Highway. So the new station, the Florida East Coast Station, wasn't built, didn't open until 1930. So it has nothing to do with the Camino Real story, but you can see why people think that. And on another note, a lot of the literature will show Camino Real with gondolas in it. No, it was not going to be navigable, but the marketing staff had no problem, sort of implying that it was. And meanwhile, in the 1950s, when Mr. Davis owned the hotel, he did in fact order real gondolas. We have photographs of these real Italian gondolas, Venetian gondolas, arriving at the hotel for people to risk their lives in the Intercoastal and Lake Boca Raton bobbing around. So there were gondolas, but they weren't intended for Camino Real. They were much more modern vehicles, if you will. So that's a little confusing story. Was there going to be a canal down Camino Real? Yes and no, but it wasn't going to be navigable, and it wasn't going to be east of Dixie Highway. It was going to be in the western provinces, if you will. So I hope that answered some of your questions. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will like and subscribe to all our social media.